give our remaining supervisors a minute or two and see if they make it in.
Krista, have you seen Chuck trying to call in yet or not?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
But I did get that email.
Yep.
Okay, I'll give them one more minute and then I'll call us to order. We have quorum, so that's the key part. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Highway Committee, special meeting of the Highway Committee to order. Call the roll shows that all supervisors are present except for Supervisor Mays and Supervisor Hartung. We do have quorum. Do we have any public comment? Krista, did anyone send anything in?
No public comment.
Great, thank you. Consideration for actions to be taken by the committee. 2022 highway budget reallocation for capital improvements. All righty. Paul, go ahead.
Just to help the committee frame the topic here. As our interim highway commissioner and our new CFO got to looking at the adopted 22 budget for highway department, it became evident that there was a lack of specificity in terms of revenues that have been approved and expenditures approved as part of that adopted budget. So Beata and Dustin and Sarah Stabenow with our finance department spent a considerable amount of time rebuilding essentially that budget, placing revenues and expenses into the appropriate cost centers, whether that be projects, road projects, annual maintenance, snow plowing, operations, etc. We found some errors, some discrepancies, and some, as I say, lack of basically of specificity. In many cases, monies were simply lumped together instead of being broken out. And so there has been an effort to rebuild that has been successful. I will turn to or recommend you ask either our CFO Beata or our interim highway commissioner Dustin to give you the highlights of what that reallocation is about. But what this committee is being asked to do after that presentation is to ask any questions that you have, and then authorize the reallocation. An important distinction: this is not a budget adjustment. We're not talking about increasing revenues, nor increase or changing the total expenditures, but we are talking about reallocating and adding some things that were not in that 22 budget. So with that having been said, Mr. Chair, I'd recommend you ask Dustin or Beata for the overview of the reallocations.
That sounds great. Dustin, you want to handle it or you want to hand it off to Beata?
Yeah, I'd just like to personally, I'd like to just thank obviously the finance department for just going through this. Obviously, it's been a learning curve for all of us, just to dive into the highway budget in general. I've learned a lot. I'm sure Beata has learned a lot, and Sarah as well. So This was a good thing to do. I guess what I will do is I'll kind of lean on Beata on this one, just due to the fact that she can probably explain in a little bit more detail regarding our 2022 budget and our findings.
Good morning. So as I presented you with a staff report to highlight the actual was adapted budget, line up the expenses with the revenue, and provided you an area with the revised. Of course, as far as payroll is concerned, salaries and wages, it was locked in. So what we did is we reallocated the budget to the appropriate cost centers for salaries and fringes. You see that when we went through the expense in machine and equipment, so the budget came a little under. And in some areas, fuel, for example, we budgeted and we came up to a little bit higher because of the increasing costs. So that provided us a savings in total expense of $170,000 and $170,743. Then we looked through the revenue, assuming that the ARPA and the debt and the levy here remains the same. We also looked at the wheel tax and in more depth. The state revenue was over budgeted in the adapted budget. But that is simply because, like Mr. Miller alluded earlier, it was just putting them in the specific cost centers and areas and recognize them what is truly state revenue and what is local revenue. So this thorough review provided us an additional a revenue of $370,080. So with the savings and increase, what we came up with revenue left us a net of a $540,823. So then this becomes available for us to reallocate to what Dustin provided, a priority equipment that's needed now. And even though, and I can let Dustin speak to those priority projects, but as numbers are concerned, we estimated that to be at a 400 or 401 if we round. So that still leaves us a little bit of a cushion. Also, when we revised the budget, we were conservative because budget, it is an estimate. We're not going to get it 100% right on. But we used historical, what we have been paying and what's been coming in revenue. And also we recognize the current state and looking into the 2022 at the end of the year, what would that need be? So Dustin, if you want to take it over and explain some of the priority equipment items that you would want to proceed. And before Justin goes in there, I want to mention too that going through this process, we identified a lot of opportunities for process improvement. And just to keep you in the loop, what we've been doing with Dustin and Sarah and the highway finance team is we are having discussions. I call it lean events and discovery. So right now we've started doing the accounts receivable process review, and that was completed yesterday. And through this process, we identified a lot of opportunities on how we're going to ensure is what we bill is what we actually receive money for, and of course, come to policies and procedures and reconciliation methods to make sure what we bill is what we've collected. So, and we started that yesterday, and we have a future state event next week. And this is where we're going to then plan what is the best practice and how is our new process going to look like.
That sounds great. Let us know that Supervisor Maves has joined us now.
Okay, so I guess I'll take that transition here. So yeah, I did put a listed together for our critical equipment needs. Obviously, we did have those quad axle lease payment that was not budgeted in 2022. We did have the skid steer trade-in that was not budgeted as well. So we would account for that with this cost savings that we have gone through. I did put in 2 aero boards. We currently have a significant need for some aero boards. Mind you, we would be replacing some aged aero boards that are actually run on diesel, not batteries. So we have a hard time keeping them going. They are rarely used because of that. We do have a need though. There is times where we get called out to set up a traffic control for an accident on a moment's notice, and we need aero boards for that use. We struggle to keep some of those going. So I propose to try to at least get at least 2 aero boards in here to update those old and outdated ones. Also, the skid steer post pounder. I don't know if anybody's familiar, but out on the interstate, going up the Knapp Hill, there's a lot of guardrail. It gets hit frequently. Obviously in the winter months, summer months, all year round. They are metal posts. Due to that, we need a piece of equipment that can actually pound those posts in. We do have an auger system, but they don't work as well with metal posts. And unfortunately, everything on the interstate is metal. There is no wood posts out there. So we did get an estimated cost for a post pounder that can be utilized for a skid steer. And that came out to about that $11,500 for that piece of equipment. The other piece of equipment is obviously our last plow truck that actually just showed up yesterday. So we have the truck and chassis that's been delivered and has been sent over to Indian Head to start the process of getting all the plow equipment on it. So basically, the total cost for this truck is that $157,918. That includes the truck chassis and all the plow equipment with it. The reason why it is cheaper is because we did have a trade-in on that vehicle. So we did get approximately, I believe it was about $75,000 for a trade-in on a 2015 tri-axle. That was actually giving us problems. So we traded that in, and that was why the cost is exponentially cheaper. So we do have to pay that in 2022. Also, we have a pickup truck that was the commissioner's truck that has been kind of handed down into the fleet. That I've came to find out that this was a leased vehicle. This lease was through basically the facilities, Public Works Facilities Department. And obviously with the split, that truck is housed here. We're looking at trying to split that truck away from the facilities fleet. There is multiple options with this truck. I'll retract. So we are currently paying $721 a month to lease this truck. It is a 60-month lease. With that being said, we are on 43 months currently what we have leased this truck. So we have 3 options. We can turn this truck into a newer truck and potentially get our payments lower due to the equity that's in this truck. We could do that, or we can sell the truck and walk away from it. And whatever cost above and beyond what the current book value is what we would get for a check. So the current book value right now is $19,162. And that is kind of what I have shown for if we would purchase this truck outright today. That would be our third option. We could actually buy this truck from under the lease at $19,162. So we've currently spent about $30,000 for this lease. So when it's all said and done, if we were to buy this truck outright, it would be approximately $50,000. My concern with the potential of selling this truck, they are valuing this truck 6 months ago at $34,000 to sell this truck. That's what Enterprise is telling us, that they suggest it would be right around that 34 to 40,000 range. Mind you, this is a wholesale sale. It's not a private sale, so the costs are less due to it going through an auction site. The issue that I see is if we sell this truck, we have to get another truck. Currently, that's the truck that I am using for engineering side of things. Since the commissioner did recently get a new truck last year. So like I said, this truck is something that is needed. I guess my suggestion is we just buy the truck outright, because I do believe we are going to have a hard time finding a truck, a 2500 series pickup truck in today's market at $50,000. A lot of the state bid contracts, a lot of dealers are not warranting the contracts because they can't get these trucks, is the unfortunate thing. So I guess my suggestion, like I said, is to just buy this truck out. It is a 2018. It only has approximately 35,000 miles on it. So it is a very good truck yet. So the only cost that we would have associated is the book value currently of the 19,162, and then we would have to title it. There is no additional cost for breaking the lease, from what Enterprise tells me. So I can get more information on that, obviously in writing, once we know how we want to proceed with it. Also, last year we purchased a 2018 screener that we screen our salt sand with. Obviously, our old screen plant was very, very outdated. And we did purchase this piece of equipment. I guess what I'm looking at trying to do at Highway is to try to be leaner with our equipment. The screen plant that we have here is literally, we utilized it for 2 weeks this year. This screen plant originally cost us approximately $160,000 for this new piece of equipment. Like I said, we utilized it for 2 weeks out of the year. It's hard to justify a piece of equipment of that stature to sit idle for 11 months out of the year. We do have the option to trade this in with airing equipment where we purchased it from. We do have a need for backhoes. We have a 2003 backhoe, a John Deere backhoe, that is currently not utilized a whole lot because it's an older model. It does have a lot of play and a lot of stuff. It does have mechanical issues. So it sits idle quite often, and we do have a current excavator, that Volvo excavator that we are looking at trying to purchase. We have a identical match backhoe to this one that we're proposing to try to trade in. our employees love that backhoe. They utilize that backhoe, and there's a need for that backhoe a lot of times. The unfortunate thing is obviously the purchase price that we bought for that screen plant, they're not going to give us the full value that we purchased for. Like I said, we paid $160 for it. They're actually giving us $145,000 for trade-in. We've literally only used it 2 weeks since we purchased it. The other option, like I said, is if we get rid of it, what do we use for screening sand? We have the option to lease these pieces of equipment through airing. We have an option to hire this out potentially. I've been in contact with Milestone Materials on numerous occasions about the possibility of hiring them to screen our salt sand for us. We would provide the salt, they would screen the sand. We do have another issue to address, and our current sand supply that we have at the Albright pit is running out. We literally probably have a year or two of sand at this facility. So we need to either explore expanding, purchasing more land, or basically utilizing lands around us. Milestone Materials does have 80 acres that is right next to our Albright pit that they do not utilize. I have requested the possibility of exploring purchasing their land, and that's pretty much out of the option. They will sell us material out of there. They will screen material out of that pit for us. And like I said, it's tough to justify a piece of equipment that we do not utilize. I believe we could have a lot more revenue created with that backhoe, and it's a need. So like I said, we would be looking at trading in that screen plant and then selling the John Deere excavator and potentially breaking even on it. We're valuing that current excavator at about $35,000, and we may get even or get more money for that. So that's what I would be proposing to try to do for our critical equipment budget. And I guess the last thing is our brush chippers. As you can see, we have a very old brush chipper. It's a 1990 chipper that we are currently leasing a chipper, renting, I should say, that the DOT has basically paid for this winter. We are paying approximately $6,000 a month to rent this machine because we do not currently have machines that are capable of completing the tasks that we need to do with our brushing during the winter months. We do have three brush chippers right now, and the oldest obviously is a 1990. Our second oldest is, I believe, a 2000. And then we do have a newer one that is utilized when need be. So like I said, we do have a need for this chipper. I did start receiving some bids in for upgrading this chipper. We do have options with either a Vermeer or a Moorbark based on our what we currently have explored. The one that we are renting is a Vermeer. It is a gas engine, which we've utilized for, like I said, the last 2 months. Our crew has basically expressed to go with a diesel engine, which has more power and torque and more reliability in the long term. The cost that we got for the identical machine that we have rented with a diesel motor on it is approximately that $74,700. that is what we've kind of allocated for the estimated cost. It was right around that 80,000. So like I said, it is a very, very definite need, where we're not renting machines to just cut brush and trying to get rid of some of this older equipment, like I said, that keeps nickel and diming us and is hard to keep running. So with the entire estimated costs and in our critical needs, is, like I said, right around that $400,000, what we've estimated and allocated for trying to utilize some of these cost savings that we found with the budget. I understand I don't want to use the cost savings if we don't have to. But unfortunately, we have a need, a critical need. And like I said, this equipment is needed, and we need to address it sooner than later, instead of just kicking it down the road every year, it seems. So that's
All right.
what I want to present on the critical needs. I'm sure it was long-winded, so I apologize.
No, it's all good. Paul, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just to round it out, obviously the committee members may have questions about the equipment that Dustin just covered, but so again, in summary, an evaluation of the adopted budget identified approximately $540,000 of budgeted revenue that was not tied to a budgeted expense. You'll also recall when we adopted the 22 budget for highway, we did not have any equipment because the highway fund balance had been depleted. When we found we had the surplus, we asked Dustin to work with Danny Nelson and identify what's critical in terms of needs that hadn't been budgeted. That's the menu that he just covered with you. That rounds to approximately 400,000, leaving a cushion, if you will, of 140,000. And given the uncertainties of budgeting, and the winter could suddenly take off on us, and winter maintenance could skyrocket either this winter or the beginning of next. There could be any number of things. Our recommendation as staff is to leave that 140,000 remaining surplus, if you will, budgeted revenue in place against the possibility of higher than expected expenses. And at the end of the year reconciliation, the committee and the county board can ultimately decide if there are any remaining revenues. Is it eligible to be placed in the highways fund balance, which we need to rebuild over time, or is it appropriate to return it to the general fund? So treating it as levy as opposed to ARPA dollars, which we know are tied to expenses that, capital expenses that we have to be able to justify. We cannot use it for operations. So it would be a levy amount, that any remaining surplus, and again, either earmark it to rebuilding the highway fund or returning it to the county's general fund. That's a decision toward the end of the year that this committee will want to consider.
Okay, so now this is all reallocation within the total budgeted amount that we already had. So am I correct in understanding that a vote of this committee to approve the reallocation would be all we would need? It would need to go on to the county board because it's not affecting the overall budget, or is this a?
This is a committee level only decision. There's no need for county board action.
All right, folks. Questions, comments, motion to accept is approved. I'm open to anything. Supervisor Johnson.
Yeah, I appreciate your letting us know, the ins and outs of everything there, Dustin. It's nice to hear some of this. My question is, what's the cost on the screening from if Milestone would do it, if you rent that, or if you have them screen for you? Would you have any idea what it would cost you a ton?
I guess that was really never discussed on the cost of it. It was just contacting them to see if it's an option. We do have a cost if we were to rent the exact same machine that we have. through airing, it would be approximately $10,000 a month to rent that. So like I said, if we would rent that for approximately $10,000 a month, it would take us about 18 years to break even with that, what we paid for this machine. Including any maintenance and all that stuff to this machine, and the depreciation value keeps going down every year on that.
That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, like I said, it's just I do not like to see equipment sit idle for 11 months out of the year. It's just there's no reason to have a piece of equipment for that. And like I said, if we have to utilize other sources, I think that's the approach we need to take.
Sounds good. Anyone else?
I would like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a-
yeah, I would like to also add that part of our process improvement is to review our actuals against the budget on a monthly basis. So when we recognize that there are overages, that we would anticipate overages that we didn't during the budget, we would know them, and then we would have a corrective action or recommendations for the board on how those will be handled. But yeah, that's part of our process improvement, is to review this with Dustin and my team, Sarah Stabenow, and in great detail.
Great, thank you. Brian, you were about to add something again?
Well, I was just gonna move to adopt a 22 budget reallocation for the capital improvements for the highway.
I'll second it.
All righty. Any further discussion? Dave?
We got some questions. Please,
Yep, go for it.
okay. Well, I guess I've got about 3 questions. So the first one is, this excavator, is it tractor or is that a wheeled excavator?
That is a track machine.
Okay, thank you. The local revenue increased that's the biggest change. And Mr. Miller, he probably kind of answered my question when he said that this is revenue that was in the budget, but didn't have any expense. So it's not, we're not adding any revenue, correct? It's what's actually there. We just didn't have an expense to, oh, correct?
Yeah, bear in mind, it's the aggregate. So the details, revenue expectations from the original version of the budget and the reallocation may vary up or down, but in aggregate, when we looked at all the revenue streams, made those adjustments, that's where the 540 of unexpended budgeted revenues. If you look at the total revenues from when we originally adopted the 22 budget for the highway, that total hasn't changed through this reallocation. The actual source may have gone up or down.
Okay. And then a couple of more things, so just bear with me. If oh, I'm getting an echo, I'm sorry. If we don't have to take this back to the county board because we're not really changing the revenue from ARPA debt or levy or wheel tax, I guess. Maybe that's why. But if we're going to see that we're going to have we're going to be in the plus at the end of the year, is what we're planning. Why don't we handle it all right now and say that anything that's left over, that'll be a plus in the black, will go into the highway fund. instead of, leave it up to the county board at the end of the year. I don't remember that ever happening before with the highway department. Any funds that they had that was left over went into the highway fund. So I'm asking, I mean, we're planning, maybe we will and maybe we won't, but hopefully right now it looks like we'll have 145 or 150,000 left at the end of the year. If that's the case, why don't we just put that into the highway fund? Because the bottom line is, if you end up spending 150,000 more than what's in the budget, the first place it would come out of is a highway fund. So I'm just throwing that out there so it doesn't have to go back to county board again in the fall or whenever. Next year.
Yeah, if I may, I'm not certain, I agree with you. I don't believe that that this committee or any other has had to say what to do with any surplus at the end of the year. It's just reconciliation. I was anticipating that perhaps a discussion at the committee level, but not necessarily action at the county board level. I'll defer to Beata on the actual process that's necessary, but in the past, you're correct, Supervisor Bartlett. This committee has not needed to say, hey, we ended the year with a surplus and that should go in the highway fund. It's just been kind of automatic. My recommendation, again, Beata can correct me, but my recommendation would be that there's no need to take any action on that part of it at this time. We simply don't know if we have any surplus. And then we follow our normal procedure for reconciliation at the end of the year.
All right, I guess I misunderstood. It kind of sounded like we had to go back to county board earlier with what somebody said. I don't know if it was you or Beata or somebody, but yeah, that's what I would like to see happen.
And if there was any confusion, it's entirely my fault. So I apologize.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Maves.
Yes, I just want to clarify something in my mind. Now, with this motion that has been made, then does that mean we're buying the truck outright for $19,000? Is that considered part of this motion?
Yes, that's as it currently stands. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Beata, you wanted to add something there?
Yep, I just wanted to clarify this, the revenue. When we reallocated or redid our budget, we actually had $370,000 additional revenue. What makes up that 540 is because we have less expenses of 171,000 approximately.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mhm.
Any more speaking to the resolution? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, the reallocation is sorted. And you can get to work on the equipment purchases and sales and.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Which takes us, according to my handy agenda here, to the highway capital improvements we had originally called the meeting to discuss. I'm glad we were able to cover more material than that, but Dustin, I imagine this one is for you.
Yeah, so obviously just wanted to go over the 2023 capital improvements, what we're projecting. Obviously, we did talk briefly the last meeting with the bipartisan infrastructure bill with the DOT and possible funding with that. I've thought a great deal of it regarding that funding, and I just currently what I believe that we should probably look at is not exploring this first go around of funding. I just, there's too many unknowns right now, that we keep finding, with our current budget and all that. To try to get, engineering, started with that, there is costs and it's not a guarantee. I completely understand we do have a need for road improvements. What I would like to do is explore this funding, but something we can plan for the future. Utilize these funds for potential 24, 25, 26, where we're not scrambling to try to get something out the door, and it's just added costs that potentially could occur. So I guess that's my recommendation is we will explore the state funding, but I would say we look at it more of a long-term prognosis and trying to look at additional funding going forward, and not potentially today. So that was my recommendation there. Just like I said, I don't know if anybody has any other feelings regarding that, if that's something. Like I said, the issue we have is just the upfront cost of something that potentially may not happen, is my concern. We are looking at some equipment needs in 2023, that currently, due to our fund balance, is going to be tough to purchase. So we do have those needs that will probably offset our needs on the roadway side. So like I said, I'd like to explore that funding, but just at a later date and time currently. I did put a list together of our construction projects, that are currently planned for 2023. On that spreadsheet that I provided for you, we do have a cost breakdown of the local projects that we are completing in-house, as well as our match DOT projects. We do have a very, very large project happening on County Road B next year, from 1229 all the way up to Anderson Windows north of the railroad tracks. I have provided the estimated costs that have been provided recently from the engineering firm that is completing the design. These costs have gone up exponentially due to the nature of the beast of costs right now. We have gotten additional funding approved by the DOT for this project. So I have put together, like I said, the estimated costs of what we're proposing to do in 2023. I did break down what the DOT funding that is potentially allocated for this project. Like I said, these are based on estimated costs. When the project gets bid out, this could all change, which currently that's not going to happen until the end of this year. So with the estimated costs and all the workload and what our portion would be, comes to approximately that $3.9 million worth of expenditures for our road constructions projects next year in 23. This year in 2022, we had allocated approximately $4.2 million worth of expenditures for our road projects. So we're seeing a similar trend in 2022 versus 2023. So the big issue is, how do we pay for it? We've gone through, obviously, we know our revenue sources that we have that are set in stone through the state. In 2022, we did borrow. We did utilize ARPA funds to offset some of these costs with our road construction and maintenance needs. Like I said, it's pretty much mirroring the 2022 budget. for expenditures. The one thing obviously that I've added to is a critical need for equipment for 2023. We keep discussing the plow trucks. I believe that is a need. I've put in the critical need equipment proposal to purchase four trucks for 23. The issue we fall into is we need to act on this sooner than later. Currently, we are looking at the spring of 23 before the truck will actually show up to our yard. And then we would be looking at probably the summer, fall of 23 before we would be actually utilizing these trucks. If we keep delaying it, it could be pushed into 24. Like I said, it is a huge need. Trying to get rid of some of these older trucks that have a lot of miles and a lot of repair costs. We do have a need for a sign truck. We do have a 2003 sign truck that's currently in need of repairs quite often. We do have a rebuilt motor in it that is still giving us problems with antifreeze and all that stuff. So it is something that we need to upgrade. It is a piece of equipment that we utilize quite often with putting signs up, repairing it, and we can also get obviously generate revenue on the DOT side of things. Upgrading some more aero boards. Like I said, I tried to spread this out over a 2-year period here for trying to upgrade some of our aero boards. They are something we need, as well as our quad axle lease payment that keeps getting brought up year after year. So there's $100,000 for that payment, and then we potentially could have the skid steer trade-in option as well. So with our equipment, critical equipment, and mind you, this is just a portion of it. I could keep going on and on and on, unfortunately, but we have to just kind of prioritize. So these are based on our estimated costs to replace this equipment in 23 would account for approximately $1.3 million. Mind you, there is some trade-in value. I would say probably not a whole lot then when it comes to these plow trucks that are old and wore out. So that is another wrinkle in the 2023 budget, since we do not have the fund balance to help offset the cost to replace this equipment. We may have to explore borrowing. We may have to explore ARPA funds. I hate to say it, but we have more expenditures than revenue source currently, just to make the place run. So.
Beta?
Yeah, I would like to also add about our fund balance. So to have a healthy fund balance would be 20% of our costs, of our expenses. So Dustin and I kind of looked at it and asked that question: how long would it take us to rebuild that fund balance? It would take us about 6 to 8 years. Now, we'll need some funding, either borrowing or ARPA, to help us pay for our match on that $3.8 million projects that Dustin addressed. Now, if we don't purchase any of the items that are on, was it 1.3 million? If we don't do that, then it will take us about 3 to 4 years to rebuild our fund balance to purchase it. So, but in the meantime, that equipment is going to age and it's not going to give us the dividends. And Dustin can correct me. I'm not an expert on the equipment, but if I just wanted to give that option that if we don't, we would we'll be sitting on it for at least 4 years until we would rebuild that fund balance. And where's that money going to come from? The fund balance is really the surplus that we would get from the from the state funds.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Paul,
And then finally, again, in a matter of context, the county board will be having a workshop on March 26th on its capital improvement plan. And that's all capital improvements across all county departments, which includes highway. So the total costs for highway between the projects and the equipment replacement is what you're being asked as the highway committee to consider, so that you are, and if you want, this committee can endorse that 23 capital improvement plan for highway, and then bring that forward to the full county board. Those of you on this committee, or Chairman McCullough, you as the chairman of highway, bring that forward to be part of the discussion on March 26th about needed capital improvements for 23. And it'll have to be done in the broader context, as Beata alluded to, of our options: levy, grants, etc., and borrowing. So what the committee is being asked to do today is consider the capital improvements, road projects, and equipment that Dustin has put together, and discuss and be prepared, hopefully, to endorse that, so that can be part of the discussion at the workshop on March 26th.
all righty. Questions, comments?
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Maves.
Yeah, I just want to hear again, make sure I totally understand what Dustin is just proposing here. So are you saying that, are you proposing not to go after any of the federal funds that are on the table for 2022?
That would be correct. Yeah,
Boy,
I would be looking at exploring the funds that could potentially be in fiscal year 23, 4, and 5, where we can utilize that. Like I said,
okay. Well, so is it your understanding that that's what's being offered now for 2022, that those projects have to be done in 2022, or do they just have to be earmarked as to, I guess I'll leave the question at that. Is it your understanding that they have to be done in 2022?
the actual construction would be performed in 23.
Okay. Okay, yeah, because that's the way I understood it, was that the work did not have to be done in 2022. It just had, the project had to be labeled and named and whatever. Okay.
Yeah, the only thing we would potentially have to spend money on in 2022 would be for engineering services. And like I said, that's a service that we would have to potentially eat if we don't get a project. I've actually I've made some phone calls to see what it would potentially cost us to do a simple engineering plan, with approximately about a 5-mile stretch of road. And I was told upwards of $30,000 to $50,000 potentially just to do a simple engineered plan. If we look at going outside of this fiscal year 2022, the engineering costs will be an 80-20 match, where we would only have to pay 20% of it. We have needs. I'm not going to deny we have needs in 2022. I mean, we can go and pulverize any road we want in Dunn County. The caveat to this is I've applied for applications in this program in the fall of 21 that we have not heard from the state if we've gotten these projects. from what we're hearing, a lot of these applications that were already submitted are going to be approved. So like I said, there's dollar amounts potentially that could happen in 2023 that we may have to account for that really haven't been known yet at this point in time. So that's why I'm kind of saying is we have a lot on our plate currently for 23. Adding more to it and finding a source to pay for it is ultimately what it boils down to. So that's why I'm kind of trying to say we want to go after this funding source, but give us time to actually find a way to come up with the funds needed.
Not to
Well,
put fine a point on it, we don't have it budgeted for the engineering today in 22. So that would have to, that's more of that potential surplus that would be eaten up. And any that were approved, we would then have to add to the capital projects for 23 above and beyond what Dustin just presented. So it drives the whole thing up. And that is why, I'm sorry?
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say, in my understanding, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that those funds, if we are looking at them in the next round, we are an 80-20 match, whereas at this point we would be paying 100% of the engineering costs. So that's, we would really prefer the projects where we're not paying quite so much engineering. Randy, you had a
Yeah, I agree with Dustin on this one. 80-20 sounds good, but we're spending a lot of money, not guaranteed to get anything. Obviously, the expenses of those roads getting worked on are going to be higher, and that was going to be my question: is what would it cost having it done that way or in house? Until we know those numbers, I agree with Dustin on this. We probably should put it off for a year and see what happens.
And just to clarify too, is a simple pulverize and repave project in-house, we can actually do that cheaper. Anytime you get the DOT involved, I hate to say it, costs exponentially go up. So those type of projects, I would like to kind of just do those in-house when we can. And then explore having these projects that need a little bit more safety improvements and stuff like that, where we need improvements that potentially a contractor would have to complete. So that's the approach that I see, and I think would be more beneficial to the county.
That's what I agree with. Yes.
anyone else? Dave?
I think we should go ahead and recommend using some ARPA funds or as much as we can to offset the borrowing for the 2023 budget. And I think we should do that now so that we can bring that to the capital improvement county board meeting that we'll be having towards the end of March. Because I know that there's other committees recommending using ARPA funds. And I realize that all of the things that other committees are coming up with are important, but this needs to be done. And some of that other stuff is wants. So I'm just throwing that out there that I think it's important that this committee has a recommendation at that meeting also.
Yeah, Randy?
Yeah, so basically what this looks like is, I mean, we're spending like 3.1 million or 2 million of ARPA funds this year to do what we're doing. And then next year in 23, it looks like about the same thing. So we're talking ARPA funds next year about the same quantity. Is that what we're kind of looking at, or plus?
I would like to see us use the ARPA funds to first $3 million of ARPA funds to offset the borrowing that we did, that we identified in our capital improvement plan last year. Because if we borrow 3 million every year for 5 years, we have a big bump in our levy. that, homeowners are gonna have to pay for. It's over and above the levy limits, but it's still levy. So I would ask that we would use $3 million to offset the borrowing and the rest towards highway. That's what I would. And then if we decide to borrow more for highway, we make that decision.
Okay, so if I am framing this properly, and more discussion, absolutely. What we are looking for in terms of a resolution is to endorse this plan as presented, with the additional note, perhaps, that to the extent possible, we would like to use ARPA funds to pay for this this recommendation and send that on to exec and to the workshop. Is that essentially correct? All righty. So when we get to that point in the discussion, that's the motion we're looking for. Anyone else have anything they want to add to the discussion? Okay. Seeing none, does someone want to go ahead and make that motion?
I would go ahead and make the motion to whatever Kelly just said, to ARPA funds and everything else.
Awesome. Thank you, Randy. Do I have a second for that motion? Supervisor Hartung. So motion by Supervisor Prochnow, second by Supervisor Hartung. Is there any further discussion? All right, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chair, I oppose.
Okay. Motion passes with Supervisor Mapes opposed. Let me pop back up in here into my agenda. That would cover everything for the agenda. With our next formal meeting will be March 9th, but we have a special meeting coming up this Friday at 8:30 for the interviews and hiring process. At this point in time, I think that I will probably not be able to attend that in person, in part because none of you want to catch what I currently have. But if possible, I will attend as well by remotely, and probably Randy will end up running the meeting in person, if that's good for everybody.
Has everybody confirmed with Heather Murray that they will be available for the meeting on Friday? I had an email yesterday. She indicated she'd only heard from 2.
So yeah, if everyone can email Heather and let her know that you're going to be there, that would be awesome. And I will email her and let her know that I will be there if I can be there remotely. But like I said, nobody wants RSV. Supervisor Hartung.
I got to work on Friday, so I don't think I'll make it.
Okay, if everybody else can make it, though, we'll still have quorum, particularly if I can attend remotely.
I'll be.
Awesome. Thank you, Randy. Is there anything else? All right. In that case, we are adjourned, and I will hopefully virtually see many of you Friday.
Bye, all.
Good,